So today I'm going to be showing you how to make a keychain when there's an odd number of strings in your pattern. I'm using this pattern, but I'm cutting a string off the end, which makes it so that there's 15 strings in this pattern. This was a requested tutorial by someone who DM'd me on Instagram, so feel free if you ever have any tutorials you want to just message me and I'll try my best to make it. So I'm going to show you how to start it with 15 strings, and this works for any kind of odd amount of strings on a keychain. You'll need whatever color your base string will be, then whatever color your leading string will be for these first 3 rows. It's going to be the same color as my background string, so I'm just using this. Now, you're also going to need a swivel keychain or just a keychain base in general. I like these swivel keychains because they're really nice for making clean keychains. I have a link in my description if you need to find these, so you can go ahead and do that if you need to. Now I'm going to take my string and make it about the length that I think my keychain will be. A little bit longer so we have some room to like tie with the string. I'm doing about 8 inches, but that's when it's folded in half. That'll be probably 16 inches in total. And I'm going to cut that off. Now each of these strings will be folded in half, but that will make it so that when they're on the keychain, they count as 2 base strings. So what happens when we have an odd number of base strings, but you can't make an odd number with 2s? Well, I will show you. So first, if you've never strung a keychain before, you're going to take the part of your string that has the loop in it, stick it through this loop, and then use 2 fingers through that loop, grab the bottom of our string and pull it through. Pull it tight up there. So as you can see, there's a knot on the bottom of that. Now I'm going to cut out the rest of my strings that I'll need. Because we will be doing 15, we're going to cut out as many as we would need for 16. So that would be 8, because 16 divided by 2 is 8. So I'm going to show you that, and you can either cut out 8 strings, or you can cut out 7 and use just this for that string, because we're going to end up using the extra string to tie on, but I will show you. So let's cut out those strings and then I'll be right back. Once again, if you've never done a keychain in general, you're just going to take that part with the loop and you're going to feed it through that loop and then pull the two bottom parts of that string through that loop. And then you'll just line them up like that when you're done. So I'm going to string all of them except for the last one. So I will have 7 strings or 14 strings on here. So as you can see by the 7 knots right there, we have 7 strings or 14 base strings on this keychain. Now we need 15. We only need 1 more. How are we going to add that? Well, whichever side of the bracelet or keychain you're starting on, which for me is always the left side, I am going to add my last string to there. You're going to want to make this last string either really long or even keep it attached to a bobbin or thread if you are using that. Now what I like to do is I like to go to the bottom of our strings and measure out how long it is with our bobbin. Now, instead of cutting it there, we're going to fold it in half and act as if it's one of those strings, but we're not going to cut it at the bottom. We're going to hold this loop and we're going to go in at the beginning of our keychain. I'm going to slide these to the side so they don't get in our way because we're going to need some space. I'm going to string it through like the other ones and make that loop nice and big because we're going to need to grab the whole thing and pull it through. Okay, so we have that attached, but that's 16 strings, unless we're using one of those strings to tie onto the bracelet with. So it doesn't really matter what side of that knot that this string ended up onto, the one we're tying with, because you can just mess around with it. And if you're using the straight edge technique like I do, which means doing a backward forward on this last string and a forward backward on this last string, then it's not even a problem. because you're just going to take whichever string is connected to the bobbin. And if the first row is the same color as your base strings. If it's not, I will show you that in just a second, so hang in there. And I'm going to tape the top of my keychain down to the table so that doesn't slide around while I'm doing it. Then I'm going to make my first knot. So I'm doing a backward forward knot. And if you don't know what this is, I have tutorials on it. But yeah, you probably want to start on an even one. But then you can move through your first row. And if you just have 2 knots of that first color on there, then just do 2. But I have a whole row, so I'm going to do this entire row. And so now I have my first row done, and that is how you make a 15 base string keychain, or a odd amount of numbers of base string, by using this as your leading string, even though it's connected to that first knot right at the top. So that is a really neat way to do it. But what happens if you have this color that's your base color, but it is not the same color as the first row, or it's not the first knot? Well, I'm going to explain this, so hopefully it makes sense. If you're doing an alpha and you're used to doing alphas, you know that when you add a string in, you tape it to the side and then you bring it in and tie it wherever it needs to go. So just like how you would do it on an even amount, say my first color was red, I would tape it down, I would make my first knot, and say I was starting from this side. I would tape this down, I would put that blue string just up and out of the way like we hadn't even added it yet. And we would add this red string in where it needs to go all this way. And you can do rows and rows and rows. But then when it's time to bring in that blue string, we just take it underneath and put it wherever it's supposed to go in the bracelet. Even though it's connected to that first string, it doesn't have to come into the bracelet until later. Now, if you don't have that color, the base color, in any of the part of the pattern, but just the base color, then you can just put it through a knot like you're doing a color switch, except don't actually make any knots with this one. So I would make a knot with the other color, make the first half of the knot with the other color, then bring the blue underneath it, and then make the second half of that knot. And then the blue could just sit until the very end of the bracelet. And then I'd probably add it in a few knots throughout, and then I'd cut it off. But in my experience, I've never made a keychain or bracelet where the base color isn't somewhere in the bracelet, because I think it looks nice like that. As you can see, white was my background color and my base color, because you can see it in these strings. And so I think you won't have a problem with that. But let me know if you have any questions, and I hope this helped you out. Good luck making your keychains with your odd amount of strings, and have a great day. Also, make sure to subscribe for more helpful content like this.